Hello and welcome to a brief overview of co-teaching basics. I'm Sonya Heineman Kunkel and I'm your facilitator. Let's get started. For more information or for more in-depth information, the Advancing Co-Teaching Practices Strategies for Success Training Manual is available on Amazon. Be sure and grab the 2021 edition. Let's take a look at the overview of what co-teaching is, especially in light of special education. Special education is instruction that is more urgent, more intensive, more relentless, more precisely delivered, more highly structured and direct, and more carefully monitored for procedural fidelity and effects. When we talk about special education services, we talk about three aspects of service. There are accommodations, things that we provide for the student around the curriculum to support access to the general education curriculum. There are modifications, which are major changes in content standards expected by the teacher for the student. And then there's specially designed instruction. Specially designed instruction is how we create instructional practices to serve the IEP goals. Accommodations and modifications are generally considered supports. Specially designed instruction are considered instructional practices. Therefore, when we co-teach, we will be doing all three of these, especially focusing on specially designed instruction. Let's take a look at exactly what specially designed instruction is. In IDEA, special education is defined as specially designed instruction, and the definition of specially designed instruction means organized and planned instructional activities, which adapt as appropriate to the needs of the eligible student, the content, the methodology, and the delivery of instruction. These are used to address the child's unique needs that result from their disability to ensure access to the general curriculum so that the student can meet the educational standard. Let's break that down just a bit. Co-teaching is not only about accommodations and modifications, but it's the methods that we use to deliver instruction. We have to be sure that we meet the child's unique needs through those instructional practices. And the law is very clear here that it's about accessing the general curriculum, but meeting the educational standards. Co-teaching has a responsibility to all 6 of these components. And as stated in the beginning of the definition, it means organized and planned instructional activities. So let's take a look. There are 2 levels of co-teaching instruction that help us deliver specially designed instruction, Level 1 and Level 2. Level 1 practices look like whole group instruction. You may see 2 teachers at the front of the classroom delivering instruction to the whole group of students. Or you might see 1 teacher teaching while 1 teacher walks around supporting students or walks around collecting data. Or you might see 2 teachers walking around supporting students during guided practice. Perhaps the students are using a cooperative learning structure and they're working in small groups, and teachers bop around from group to support students on their tasks. These are all Level 1 practices. These practices are supportive in nature and not necessarily specially designed in nature. Generally speaking, a special design comes from Level 2 practices. This is when 2 teachers, in some sort of simultaneous way, teach to smaller groups of students. It is a continuous combination of various flexible groups, whereby each teacher is teachered to predetermined specific objectives. This might look like having 2 groups at the same time, or 3 groups that rotate, or 4 groups that flip-flop and switch. There are a number of combinations in which these small group instructional practices can be delivered. but part of that instructional delivery is to ensure that the child's IEP goals are embedded in the instructional design and the instructional practice. If this is a child's special education service time, then they must be served by having their IEP goals met within the confines of the co-teaching classroom. Let's take a look at a few of the common co-teaching practices. Mirror is a level 2 practice whereby two teachers teach the exact same objective at the same time. Some teachers might find it bothersome to have noise levels where you hear yourself teaching in stereo. Let me give you some suggestions for practice to make mirror work for your students. First of all, you want to make sure you have some good planning time. Mirror requires two teachers to discuss the objectives in great detail so that each group is taught to the same level of specificity and one group is not put in a disadvantage compared to the other group because teachers didn't appropriately plan. If mirror is a practice that the teachers would like to embrace or pilot, my suggestion would be to teach the same thing at the same time, but using different strategies. So as an example, if one group is learning using the whiteboard and perhaps some computers or some text support, the other group might be doing the same objective, but it was being taught to that group using kinesthetic and hands-on methods so that students whose learning styles are in that area can be matched to the instruction being provided. By varying instructional methodology, students can have different opportunities to learn and be matched to their areas of learning success. A question I often get here is it okay if students sit back to back? Absolutely is the answer. Students are not necessarily bothered by the noise in the classroom as long as it's white noise. So in the example of the instruction being differentiated by instructional teaching style, students would not be hearing what's going on in the other group as competitive noise because it would be more white noise, which makes it easier to tune out the other group and to focus on the instruction in front of them. Give it a try. You might find you like this instructional practice. Here are two other instructional practices, two types of flip-flop groups. On the left, we have a straight-up flip-flop. This is the lowest planning practice that there is at level 2. One teacher teaches to one objective, and the other teacher teaches to a different objective. Halfway through the lesson, the teachers flip-flop their groups. As an example, one teacher teaches content, and the other teacher teaches a vocabulary strategy, which was embedded as part of IEP instructional needs. After about halfway through the class, the groups switch, and both teachers teach the same lesson again, but to a different group of students. This can provide some continuity with instruction, but each teacher only needs to plan for their instructional practice, and they don't have to be as concerted as we outlined in the mirror option. Some more information on flip-flop. If students without IEPs benefit from the vocabulary instruction, this is actually a piece of the IDEA law called incidental benefit. It is okay for students without disabilities to receive that instruction, especially if they benefit from it. Another consideration is, by changing seats halfway through a class, having a different teacher with a different voice and a different style, students' attention to task can increase. Another benefit of this practice is that opportunities to respond are increased in smaller groups. This also provides for more time on task, and by having more opportunities to respond and more time on task, students are more successful in their academics. On the right-hand side, you see flip-flop switch. For flip-flop switch, what you do is you take your assessment information and you group students into two groups, students that are ready for the next lesson and students that need more work to support their entry into the next lesson. Then one teacher pre-teaches the lesson, providing skills and strategies to help the student access the curriculum, while the other teacher teaches the lesson. And then halfway through, the groups switch. The pre-taught group goes to the teacher and gets the lesson, now entering in with some pre-teaching, while the content group, the group that received instruction at the onset of the lesson, goes to the other teacher and they either get reteaching or they get enrichment. This would be based on a signal provided by the teacher who was sending them to the other group. By doing this, we differentiate instruction, but we also provide students with the type of instruction that they need. The teacher providing the pre-teaching or reteaching or enrichment can also incorporate many of the strategies needed by students as outlined in their IEPs. There are many ways to offer three-station teaching in co-teaching. On the left, a simple three-station rotation means that you set up each teacher to teach an instructional objective, and you add a third independent station. Students work on an independent task either alone or in pairs or as a group, while Teacher 1 and Teacher 2 conduct lessons teaching to two specific objectives. In some sort of a timed interval, students rotate. So students might start in the independent group, and then after 15 minutes they rotate to Teacher 1, and then after 15 minutes rotate to Teacher 2. They will have 3 different mini lessons throughout that rotation. An important aspect of three-station rotation is the use of a timer. Set a timer so that each group gets their allotted time and that the rotation occurs when needed. Another three-station option is a tiered approach. In the example on the right, you might have 20 minutes to work with students in smaller groups. One group, however, is going to need extended instructional time. So one group might work with one teacher for 20 minutes, while the other teacher works with one group for 10 minutes, and the third group works independently, then switches to the third group for 10 minutes, while the first group that teacher was teaching works independently. What happens is one group gets 20 minutes of instruction and two groups each get 10 minutes of instruction. By providing that, we provide opportunities to slow the curriculum down for students that need it, or extend or enrich the curriculum as students might benefit from that as well. You don't have to rotate amongst all 3. There are a variety of combinations you can use with 3 stations. Another option might even be 3 stations with tiers. You and your co-teacher will experiment with these variety of configurations and figure out which lesson matches what needs to be taught, and you'll find that your students appreciate having a variety of instructional practices that are brought to them for them to learn. When using 4 stations, you can see on the left that 4-station rotation, very similar to 3-station rotation, has its advantages in a timed fashion. I find that 4-station rotation is great for review practice. Students spend about 10 minutes in each station doing something like a skills cleanup or a quick practice as a review before a test. They move from Teacher 1 to an independent station, perhaps where they're working on their Chromebooks, to Teacher 2, working on another skill, to Station 4, where they'll do another independent station working in pairs, practicing vocabulary flashcards with each other. The possibilities here are endless. My favorite configuration is the 4-station flip-flop on the right-hand side. Basically what happens here is you take your 24 students in your classroom and you split them in half into 2 groups of 12. Each teacher now only has 12 students for that day. So for example, Teacher 1 with Group A will first teach half of her 12 students, or 6 of them, while Group B works on an independent practice activity. And then halfway through the 40 minutes, after 20 minutes, the groups switch. So each teacher works with only groups of 6 for 20 minutes. Whereas in 4-station rotation, you're working with groups of 6 for 10 minutes, which would be good for a quick review. On the right-hand side, 4-station flip-flop allows for teachers to go in deep. Curriculum rigor is part of this solution here. I love working with small groups of students where they have increased opportunities to respond and increased time on task. When these students leave my group, I have a keen understanding of their progress, and I am able to configure the next day's lesson based on what I truly understand each and every student to know. Another configuration worth considering or using intermittently when needed is the skills group approach. During skills groups, the whole group is working on some sort of guided practice activity. While the whole group is working on their activity or task, each teacher takes a small, flexible group of students for a small amount of time to work on a particular needed skill. As an example, the whole group is working on the writing process, and one teacher pulls 3 or 4 kids aside to work on where the commas go, while the other teacher works on the organization of an introductory paragraph. After 5 to 10 minutes, those students are sent back to work on their activity, and then 3 or 4 more students are pulled by each teacher. This way, these groups are flexible, the makeup of the groups are flexible, and so is the content of the group. Each small group of students can receive what they need. This is also an opportunity for one teacher to work on social skills or executive function skills to help the students interact appropriately in the classroom. I hope you found this information helpful. There are many more configurations than the ones provided here, but these configurations are good, solid practices to help you get started with your Level 2 co-teaching. Just a little bit on planning. In order for co-teaching to work, you will need to work together in a collaborative method. Now, co-planning can take place in a lot of ways. Can it take place technologically via Facebook or in a Zoom meeting or via Google Docs? Sure. Can it happen in person? Absolutely. But however you and your co-teacher choose to do it, co-planning is required. You need to analyze your data, look at student groupings, decide who's going to teach what, decide on timings, and all of the items that have been shared with you so that your configurations run smoothly. If you find you don't have a lot of planning time, stay away from whole group structures. They require a lot of planning. Mirror also requires a lot of planning, but perhaps a good starting point for you would be the 2, 3, 4 group configurations as well as the skills groups. These can have lower planning and higher outcomes for your students. Find a place where both you and your teacher are comfortable and grow your program. It isn't all going to happen at one time, but I think once you find a successful spot, you will grow your program and your students will benefit from that growth. Thank you for all that you do for all students, and I wish you well as you practice your co-teaching endeavors. If I could be of any help, please feel free to reach out. Bye-bye.